I am pretty excited actually about this this panel, because I think one of the things that I tell folks about working at the legislature is if you don't think of it as a decision-making body, but think of it as a workplace, it is a workplace unlike any other. And the things that you are sometimes asked to do, or the schedule that you are sometimes asked to keep, would not be tolerated in any other workplace. And mind you, you've got 201 colleagues in the legislature, or 200 colleagues, because you're going to be one of them. And it's a complicated, interesting, just challenging environment to work in under the best of circumstances. And obviously this last year has been extra wacky. So imagine starting a new job in a pandemic with all of these new colleagues and all of these other people who come at you with things that they want, and trying to navigate it all, trying to figure out how to draft bills, how to understand legislation, how to just get your brain around the issues that you are confronted with, all while doing so remotely. So I'm really excited to have our panel here today. So we've got two of our panelists here. We've got one more who's going to be coming in hot, which is just fine. So to start with, we've got Representative Emma Greenman from Minneapolis, and then we've got well, you can describe your district. Do you live in Richfield or do you live in Minneapolis?
Minneapolis, but it's both.
Well, yeah, you can describe that. I'm just saying where you're from. She's from Minneapolis. She'll tell you the rest. And then Senator Eric Putnam from St. Cloud, and then we're going to have Representative Spencer Igo from Grand Rapids join us once he comes screaming in here. So just to start with, I'm going to have our panelists just kind of to introduce yourself and briefly talk a little bit about the district that you represent, although maybe you've already given it all away. Yeah. Should be on.
Well, it is really wonderful to be here with all of you. I am Emma Greenman, and I represent 63B, although don't get too comfortable with those numbers because they're all about to change. And I represent South Minneapolis and Eastern Richfield. And my background is I'm a voting rights lawyer, and I spent the last, I came out of private practice and then spent the last 5 years working around the country to expand access to our democracy, and I am really grateful to be here.
I am too. This is pretty great. It's also nice that since Representative Igo is going to be coming in hot, that means Em and I can be cold and tepid. So my name's Eric Putnam. I represent District 14, which currently is St. Cloud, Waite Park, St. Augusta, Haven-Minden Township. So sort of greater St. Cloud area. My day job, I'm a professor at St. Ben's and St. John's. I've taught there for 18, 19 years now. And I'm a reluctant politician, but so far I'm pretty much enjoying it. And I'm really glad to be here to visit with you guys today. So thanks for having us.
All right. So the legislature, as we all know, is a pretty relationship-driven environment. And so after a year of legislating remotely, do you feel like you've been able to establish relationships with your colleagues, both within your caucus, but also members of the other party?
This is where it'd be fun to have Spencer here as well, because we serve in the same body, different parties. I was talking to a set of college sophomores recently, and I said, we were both freshmen in the pandemic. We don't know what anybody looks like either, or how tall they are. And so I think that it has been a challenge. It's been a challenge just because it is you walking into a body with, in the House, there's 134 members. There is staff, both nonpartisan staff and partisan staff. There's the whole set of folks who make it run. And then there's the Senate and building those relationships too. And so I think it is on a good day and in a normal year, it is a great opportunity, but it's also a challenge. And I think in a pandemic, it has been harder. That said, I think that we have all really, like everybody else, frankly, in the world, has been really innovating new ways to build relationships, have had a lot more phone calls probably, and a lot less conversations in the hallway. And as we moved into special session, there was more time on the floor. But I do think that one of the things we've been thinking a lot about is over the next year and over the summer and over the year, how can we do more together to build those relationships? Because it is a moment that is hard, and it matters probably even more now than in normal times.
Well, so I mentioned earlier that I was a reluctant politician, and the way that manifests here in terms of this question is that I'd never actually been in the Capitol building until the day I took the oath of office. I didn't have many pre-existing relationships or much experience with politics or other politicians before I was actually supposed to be one. And that's challenging. So I want to second everything that Emma just said, but I also want to extend it a little bit and say that just like everybody, we're in this new sort of hazy post-COVID kind of environment right now that's unclear. And recreating relationships now is almost as difficult as it was to establish them 8 months ago. And there's so many masks that have been hiding mustaches that we just didn't know were there. And so many people that we've met in a little square box or a rectangle that are tall, exactly, that we just have never had a chance to have that in-person relationship. So even though we've seen people on Zoom, that gives you a sense of sort of false relationship or superficial relationship to some extent, then you meet that same person in person and you think, I kind of know you, but I kind of don't. So to me, that's one of the variables, in addition to the difficulty in creating those initial relationships, which was profound, and isn't exclusive just to our life as politicians, but it's this secondary making relationships with people you kind of know, but kind of don't, or people that you've seen on a committee, or people you've seen on the floor, but you never really had a chance to visit with. That's a struggle too.
I think, one of the things, in addition to sort of doing the relationship piece that I've struggled with, is, as a lobbyist, you get a lot of context by standing outside of one's office. You get a sense for what the legislator's day is like. You get a sense for kind of what's going on, if their LA is coming in and giving them messages. And, trying to do lobby by Zoom, you get this box, right? And so, like, their couch could be on fire to the left of them, and, they could have a draft to the right of them, and it'd be very, very difficult to have any sense of context there, and I think that's been what's been difficult. And so now I would like to introduce, coming in hot, Representative Spencer Igo. Talk a little bit about, just introduce yourself a little bit and talk a little bit about the district that you represent, and then I'm going to ask you another question that these two just answered.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me, everyone. I'm Representative Spencer Igo, so I represent House District 5B, so that makes up Itasca and Cass counties, kind of in the northeastern part of the state. So yeah, it's a unique district in the fact that I have parts of the Iron Range as well as basically the northern Brainerd Lakes area. So my district kind of makes up the 3 T's, timber, taconite, and tourism, and that kind of what drives a lot of the conversation. I serve on the Energy Committee and the Natural Resources Committee, so I kind of call that my 1-2 punch for the region. And I also serve on the Redistricting Committee as well. So super excited to be here and part of the conversation today.
So thanks, hang on to that, Mike. We were just talking about the fact that the legislature is a very relationship-driven environment. And so just talk a little bit or reflect a little bit on kind of some of the challenges that you've had as a new person on the job, trying to make relationships with your colleagues and with staff and with other stakeholders at the legislature, and some of the awkwardness or how you overcome it. Talk about the relationship piece a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, one, coming into the legislature, it's a relationship business, and then you go to a state office building that the lights aren't even on half the day. So to me, and to my freshman class on the GOP side, we found it really important that we were going to be at the state office building as much as possible. And I think it gave us a really unique opportunity to get to know each other really, really well. I mean, I'll speak for my caucus that our freshmen, we really know each other really, really well, because we were sometimes the only people in the building that day. So we worked on a lot of legislation together, but we also shared a lot of tactics with each other. So even though we were facing extreme adversity under the times, we kind of really banded together to become a really close group, a little mini caucus inside of our own, really. And then we used that to talk with other people and meet and foster other relationships. Because a lot of the times when I was meeting with other people on the other side of the aisle, it was usually a phone call or a Zoom call the first time I was meeting them. But it would usually be through maybe meeting them through an older member or someone who's been there a while that I was able to meet because I was at the state office building as much as I was with other members of my freshman group. So it really was a unique experience, but heck, now that we're here, it was great.
All right, we'll tell you what, how about you hang on to the mic? I'll ask you the next question and then we'll bring it back this direction here. So learning a new job is hard under any circumstance, and the job of legislator, like we talked about, is pretty unique, even under the most ideal of conditions. So what was the hardest part about learning the job this year, especially doing so oftentimes largely remotely?
You know, the hardest part about the job is that there wasn't maybe someone always there to ask questions, right? So I guess even if, let's talk about the committee structure, right? I'm not sitting there next to the CA who I can be like, hey, what's going on with this process? I had no answers there, right? So not having anyone to talk to in that regard, or even just being able to have that chance to have that face-to-face conversation. I think everyone in this room can say we're tired of Zoom world, right? But the hardest part of that job was finding someone to talk to. So, you know, yes, we had our freshman group like I just talked about, but sometimes you need to talk to a member that's been there 2, 3, 4 terms to get some answers. I would say that was probably the hardest part, is figuring out the job is, who do I ask questions to? Because that was really kind of lacking.
All right, what was the hardest part of learning the job in the new senator?
Well, you know, after I could find my parking space reliably, everything else just kind of fell. I guess it was in the fancy office building. I felt very well supported. I had my aide is a great guy who had done the job for many years before, and so he was tremendously helpful to kind of give me advice and tell me what was going on. But I've been a teacher for 25 years, and there's a rhythm to that life. You know how the semester is going to unfold. All of our jobs, all of our careers that we've had for times, they have a kind of calendar or rhythm to them, and you have seasons. And I just didn't really understand or know the season of a legislative cycle. I didn't know when things happened, or I'd hear about, you know, it's the last chance to get this bill in or that bill. And I would find out that the week before. So I didn't really know the kind of calendar of the legislative session. And that's one thing that I struggled with a little bit, because you can't really have that explained to you because it's so dynamic and it changes every year. But people who've been there forever, I think, have a kind of rhythm or familiarity with it that I didn't have, and I didn't really feel like I had a great way to learn that. So for me, that was my biggest challenge, was kind of not knowing exactly what was going to happen next, wondering what was going to happen in May that would be different from what happened in February, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I'd say the oncoming and the incoming, in that you start, you're sworn in, is the first day I think we got our LAs, and just not having a process for how you are going to handle the constituents, the other members, the lobbyists, the staff, the everything is just, and I anticipate that and I've talked to more senior members, that I think that is always a challenge. I think in this moment it was, and then in addition to it, it was, and are you on the phone, are you in Zoom, how are you handling it? And this was a year where I will say, you know, we were talking about this, the day I got elected, people started calling about, I mean, COVID's been really hard for folks, right? Whether it's parents talking about their kids in schools, whether it was folks who were trying to get their unemployment when they were laid off. It has just been a tough time, and people need support and help. And so being a first germer and really wanting to be able to help and serve people in this moment, and also trying to figure out where your parking spot is and how to turn on the lights and which key opens your door, was just I think a little bit more challenging this year. But I anticipate that those, like, in session, it's like suddenly everybody turns it all on, and learning how to handle that. I think this session will be better.
It really is. Under the best of circumstances, pretty chaotic at the legislature the first couple of days of session, because like they said, I mean, you don't necessarily have a phone, you don't necessarily have a computer, or you're getting it just the first day. And so then imagine just doing that in this environment. It's pretty remarkable. So, you know, as Senator Putnam mentioned, we're you know, kind of, you know, moving hopefully out of the pandemic, but we're in this sort of fuzzy time right now. But what aspect of the job are you most looking forward to once the legislature is able to return to normal functioning?
You know, so I was thinking about this a little while ago. Can I tell a quick story?
Yeah, please.
So, first day of special session, June 14th, I think it was. I was walking through the tunnel from that incredibly fancy Senate office building towards the Capitol, and I hear this sound, this little murmur, and I was like, well, what is that? What's that sound? I kept walking through the tunnel, and I get into the Capitol itself. It gets a little bit louder, sort of a rumbling at this point. And then I go up a flight of stairs and I go, oh, that's people. It's the sound of people in the Capitol, which is something that I had never heard. And I get up to the rotunda, there's 100 people banging on drums and screaming how things that were very critical of the governor, and I'm a Democrat, whatever, but I see all these people screaming all these things are really critical of the governor. I was like, you guys are awesome! I'm so glad you're here! And I ran down to talk to people and to see them, and there was something wonderful, genuinely democratic about people being in the people's building. It was very powerful for me to hear that. And I thought how difficult it must have been to know that it was supposed to be like this, and to go through a whole 6 months without seeing that. Those veteran legislators who expect to see the people in the people's house and didn't get to for 6 months. I didn't know better. And so when I saw it, it was beautiful and amazing and exciting for me. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of that in January.
Yeah, kind of on that same note, having people there, but also really getting to the committee process. Virtual committee process is not good. I'll just be honest with you. When you as a member are wanting to talk about an issue or bring up an amendment and you're given 15 seconds to talk about something, that's not good for anybody. That's not good for the conversation, that's not good for the issue, but I look at that as my constituents had 15 seconds in St. Paul. When we're in person and you can look someone in the eyes and you can show your passion and share that moment, that's how you get towards the road of compromise, right? That's how you get on the path to get things done. But when you're behind a screen, and I'll be honest, and I think you guys will attest to it, 2/3 of those people have their camera off, and we all know what they're doing. They're on their phone, responding to someone else or responding to an email. We need to get back to the relationship business that politics is, and that means having us in a room. So I'm excited to get to a committee process that means I'm sitting at a table with everyone that's on the committee, and we're really going to hash out the issues and have a conversation.
Representative Greenman, what are you most looking forward to?
Yeah, I share both of those things, and I will say one of the things I think we learned was legislators in person, but keeping a virtual option for testifiers. Just as something we have heard over and over again, particularly from folks in greater Minnesota, that it's nice to be able to testify and not have to make the 3-hour trip. And so that's, I think, something that we've been really reflective about. But I agree on the just being together more. And then the other thing I think I'm most excited about is actually in my district, more opportunities. We have been doing, in the summer we did some in-person things, but a lot of virtual stuff, mostly because people are still pretty concerned and we're through session, but really looking at ways that folks can be more active and engaged in the policymaking process with both us, but also with committees. We're doing a lot of opportunities to encourage folks to testify and finding ways for engagement so that it is not just legislators talking to each other, but we are actually bringing in the voices directly of our constituents. And I think that there's an opportunity that people are hungry for, and I'm really excited about that.
All right, so figure out what question I want here. Flip. As a first-term legislator, do you feel like you've been able to have an impact on the legislative process and the outcomes as things went through session? Do you feel like yeah, I was there and I made it happen on anything? Or did you feel like you were not able to do that?
So I feel like I should start because I think I'm the only one here in the majority in my body. And I think that's just so the way that the system works. But I do, I think that what I learned is there's actually a lot of different ways to and a lot of different ways to legislate and a lot of different ways to make an impact. There is taking your bill, and especially if it's sort of a concrete bill, all the way through the process of the governor. There's participating and being a part of an omnibus bill, and I was on conference committee on our state government and elections bill, and really focused on pieces of that to make our government response stronger and making sure that our whole state is being well served by state government. And then there's a ton of partnerships, and what I was surprised by was how much in that process and in the omnibus process there really is there's a lot of bipartisan conversations going on. There's a lot of role that both the chairs and the minority leads are working together, and it may not always agree at the sort of the end point on everything, but really figuring that piece out, that how we are spending our resources, what we're investing in, and to me that is what I am most proud of. I also introduced a bill that was House Bill 9 that I took through 6 committees, which turns out is pretty hard. And so really excited that we had hours of testimony on something like expanding our democracy.
So from the minority perspective, being in that unique opportunity where it was, I think I'll just use the word quiet, right? Because it was very quiet in St. Paul, yet very loud because of the issues we were facing. Us, as a freshman, I think I tried to use this ability to say, okay, there's not so much noise directly in front of me, but there's noise when I look outside my window. How do I channel this energy that is the state right now, right? With the issues we are facing, and put that into the work I'm doing. So I think the first thing that I did that I really, used to be successful is I utilized social media, right? And I think we all can talk about how important that was this session. That was doing videos, right? That was reaching out to my constituents and saying, yeah, I'm in St. Paul and I know you can't be here, but a few clicks on your phone or on your computer and you can be right here with me and I can make that happen. And I used that to I did pass a bill in the minority, which is something I'm pretty proud of because, as we know, that's tough, and we didn't pass that many bills this year in all reality. And it was a bill that's going to help out all of our dispatchers across the state. So it's a bill that's going to make Minnesotans safer. And it's on I had to go through a committee that I don't even sit on. And I think I was able to accomplish that because of those things. Listening to my constituents, but also opening up through a virtual world, an avenue where their voices could be heard, and then applying that in the legislature this year that was quiet, but also making a big splash that way. So, I don't know, it was unique, but I think if you found your way through the adversity, you were successful.
I think it would build on what Representative Iko was talking about, in that I think there's just at least 2 different modes of efficacy for a legislator. One is actually through legislation, but the other is through engaging in your community and doing the best you can for your community. And as he and I know, we're freshmen in the minority, we're not supposed to get anything done. People are actively trying to make us not get anything done because they don't want us to be there anymore. So it's harder for us to get anything accomplished at all, legislatively. And I knew that going in, so my primary strategy was to make sure that I was invested in St. Cloud as much as I possibly could. Doing everything I could for every constituent every single day. I respond to every single email, phone call myself. My LA doesn't respond to anybody for me. I do all that myself. And I try hold town halls once a month. I hold office hours in St. Cloud once a week. Every Friday I would come home and have public office hours. So to me, there's different modes of efficacy. And I think he's spot on in showing that there should be a greater connection between those 2 things, but sometimes it feels like there isn't. And I do feel fairly good about a couple things that I actually was able to accomplish. I got a couple floor amendments passed, which is really, really rare for a freshman in the minority. And I think that they were important, significant things. I did a lot of work myself on something called the Hunger-Free Campus Act, thinking about people who are in post-secondary education are basically the working poor today. And I was able to get this bill passed. And the process of passing it was really fascinating to me too. I got to meet with all these different advocates, all these different students. I had to learn so much about the bill itself and work it through by talking about it to different audiences to get it accepted and passed. And I did all that by myself, which feels pretty good in some ways. But the funny thing also, I think, is we're legislators, we're not executives. So none of us really has ever done anything on our own. Everything we accomplish is a result of someone else saying, okay. So it's not like I blanch sometimes when I see legislators saying, I got this for you. Well, yes and no. Because everything we accomplish is accomplished because we're able to get other people to agree, and we're able to motivate other people to agree with us in the first place. So I guess that's how I would answer it.
Yeah, well, congratulations to all of you actually on being able to pass some legislation and do some things that are worthwhile and that are important and that you're proud of. That's tremendous. As Senator Putnam, stated in an earlier question that, the legislature kind of has its own rhythm, its own process, its own way of doing things. I sometimes, say that it's, the best process that the 19th century could invent. And so then I would say, I would ask the question then, sort of pandemic aside, what is one thing based on your experience this year that you would change about the legislature?
Well, just because the way that you phrased the question, I think, is you teed up the Senate perfectly. It's just us, right? So I can talk honestly. The Senate is archaic in a number of ways. We're deeply invested in all of these traditions. Some of them, I think, are wise and prudent and a nod to the past, and some of them are ridiculous. Like, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the Minnesota Senate is the only body in the entire country that seats the majority in the back and the minority in the front instead of Democrats on the left and Republicans on the right. And in theory, we're not supposed to be able to turn around. That's ridiculous. A lot of the people I work with would wear white wigs if they could get away with it. And that's a bit of a challenge for me. I mean, I understand and respect the institution. I absolutely do, and its history. But it doesn't come naturally to me. That kind of hierarchy does not come naturally to me. So I do occasionally struggle with it a little bit.
We don't have that in the House. It is, my sense is it's a little rowdier. Also, you're not supposed to talk, and if you ever watch the House floor, especially as it gets a little later in the night, sometimes the speaker pro tem will have to softly tap the gavel and say, please quiet down, take your conversations outside, because it gets raucous, and I like that. I think that creates relationships and stuff. But one thing I would say is, I think we need more time. When we talk about building a budget, we get the budget forecast in late February, and right now, sort of constitutionally, we have to be done by the middle of May. We just don't have enough time to do the work, and with I think both Representative Igo and Senator Putnam, I agree with them. Legislating is a team sport, and the team is big, right? It is not just your caucus, it is not just legislators, but it is all of the stakeholders. It's the agencies, it's the folks in community, it's the experts and the lobbyists, and sometimes beyond that. And so really to do the kind of work that we should be doing, listening more, hearing more from a broader set of folks, and also making sure that we're really rooting everything and take the time we need. I think that we need more time especially in budget years, but probably in policy years too.
So I guess my thing and my observation is, and it's kind of simple almost, we need to get back to conferencing bills on their own. That means moving away, I think, from these large omnibus bills. And I think the big thing right there is, we get to the end in these special sessions that we're doing, and now everyone, especially probably all of you in this room, are trying to figure out where your piece of legislation is lying, when in reality, we could have been conferencing a lot of these bills through session, maybe in some evening committees. It would make it more transparent process. It would have more people involved, and it would probably have a lot more things that get done that need to happen. And instead, we don't find out the next day on, the news outlet that 3 people in a room decided where the conference bill is going to be. We need to get back to doing bills on their own and letting committees conference these bills, and not put all the power into majority leaders and speakers.
Yeah, well, I think that's dead on. I mean, I've been working at the Capitol for about 15 years, and even in that time, there's been a significant slide in terms of the level of transparency and engagement of stakeholders, especially at the very, very, very end. And not only is it, I think you get a better product from a policy standpoint, but when you've got more eyes on it, you're essentially, group editing your work so that you're not making mistakes. Right? If you remember a couple of years ago, there was that $100 million mistake that had to do with a gaming piece of legislation. Well, I was in that tax conference committee when they took the bill out. They passed a spreadsheet. They didn't have the language. And then the language got printed, and it came, and it landed on the legislators' laps. They signed it. That was the conference report. It was done. Nobody actually read it. And that was before the pandemic. And so hopefully we can get back to some of those things.